generally very pleased with the bill. So just a few comments really from this perspective. Two people have already mentioned how important it is that Ontario actually have its own vision for immigration. So we're very, very proud that Ontario does have its first legislation. We think it's important that the province chart its own course on immigration, and that the language also represents the long history, we use the same word as the long history of the values that Ontarians have for immigration, inclusivity and diversity. We also like the fact that the bill uses the word nation building, or the term nation building. This is language that OCASI, not COSI, that OCASI, same 5 letters, just moved around. That OCASI has used that language, as have others, and we take nation building to mean that it's about integration and inclusion, as well as diversity. And with that language of integration and inclusion, we also see that this moves us intrinsically to issues of race and of equity and hopefully of employment equity. We're also pleased that the bill makes a commitment to Francophone services. The original expert roundtable in which we participated had recommended that the province should commit 5% of its targets to Francophone immigration. And we also want to note that the French-speaking immigration to Ontario has in fact increased over the last 10 years by only a few numbers, but it is going on the upswing. The bill also makes an implied commitment to supporting Francophone settlement and integration. There's only one reference to Francophone immigration, however, in the preamble of the bill, it does specifically say that we will be enabling all communities across Ontario, including Franco-Ontarian communities, to attract, welcome, and integrate immigrants. So we're pleased that basically the Francophone issue is embedded within the entire act. The bill recognizes the partnership role of municipalities and employers. We were pleased when COYA recognized formally the role of municipalities, and we're pleased to see this in this bill as well. We were not so pleased to see that the sector was not named per se as having a formal role, despite the recognition of the importance to fund and have services for newcomers. We are having conversations and hopeful that perhaps the sector could be codified in the language as well. On the issue of selection, of course, the new policy allows us, as Alice described, to work with federal government to set targets for Ontario to have our own selection. That, I guess, needs a lot of detail to come forward to understand how that could work, how that might work. At one point, the expert panel had hoped that we could have an immigration agreement with the federal government like the Quebec model, where we acted quite independently and selected all of our own. That clearly didn't happen, not likely to happen. Nice position to take, though. We also strongly support the increase in the provincial nominee numbers, hopefully up to, I think you said 5,500, about triples what we have now or more. But a very important piece of the makeup of the demographics of people that will stay in Ontario. The commitment to establishing, well, I think it actually says establish and fund immigrant settlement programs. We're pleased that the province already establishes and funds immigrant settlement programs in Ontario, but having it embedded in legislation, as you already said, is really, really important to us. We do want to note that the huge loss to the sector that occurred through previous to last government hasn't been reinstated in any way, shape, or form. So we are still struggling with relatively tight resources for settlement services in Ontario. We do want to note that the NSP program, most of you who are delivering the program would know that is currently under review. And while the NSP program being the primary settlement program that the province has, needs to, of course, complement the federal settlement programs as it has traditionally, it does need to, and I think that's the plan, move out, step out on its own to some extent, so that it's actually meeting the specific current needs and future needs that will be impacted by the change, by the new legislation. And there needs to be a robust program that includes a broader element of services that currently exists. We also urge MCI to work with other ministries, other key ministries, to address some of the very important issues that newcomers face, such as employment, of course. The bill will improve fairness and access to health professionals, as Alice mentioned already, that are internationally trained, and requires all of the normal accountabilities that are included in the Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act. So we know that that profession was excluded in the 2006 legislation, so we're really thrilled that the Commissioner's request, Jean Augustin's request to have it added into those regulations was accepted. Very important. I'm not going to speak to the recruiter registry or the employer registry because I think others on the panel are going to have a lot more to say about that, so I'll just pass. So what does it mean for the sector? I guess generally really good things. Giving immigration and immigrant settlement and integration weight in law is new and it's good for the sector. As I mentioned before, we were hoping that the sector would be named, and we don't want it to seem like an aside. So OCASI will be doing its job in terms of advocating on behalf of the sector to put our place within the language, and also to work with other sectors, the private sector. I mean, we're open now to many new relationships with different stakeholders in terms of where we can go in terms of talking to the private sector, to industry, to regulated professions, and to municipalities, schools, hospitals, and the like. Ontario's stated desires and ambition to be involved in immigrant selection and target setting is in reaction to falling numbers and a sluggish economy. Taking immigration seriously is good news for immigrants, for immigrant communities, and for the sector. Costi needs to be and will be up front and center in articulating this vision for immigration. David? Sorry? What did I say, coffee? Oh my God. Well, I did say I was sick, so you don't have to. Well, then I'll pass the time back a session for Statements on immigrant settlement and integration programs and funding is also good news for the sector. The government clearly is taking the sector's role seriously, even though we weren't named. They are serious about taking a good look at the kinds of supports and resources that are required by the sector in order to help newcomers integrate. And again, we'll reiterate the call to look at how additional resources could be allocated to reverse the cuts that occurred some time ago. One more comment, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and many others have spoken about how immigrants have not achieved what they or any of us want to have achieved, and that the implication is that the immigrant selection is at fault. So while a lot of the new legislation, federal legislation, looks at improving selection, we do need to pay attention. I think those of us in the sector know that there are many, many other reasons that immigrants don't succeed. It's not all about selection. So access to labor market, racial discrimination, and all kinds of other systemic barriers. There is evidence, obviously, in research that those issues continue to be barriers to immigrants succeeding. So the government must invest in new approaches, and we hope that the NSP program review will result in that, and really should look at employment equity. And OCASI has been making that point repeatedly. We still feel that employment equity legislation is key. So recommendations on the ongoing NSP review will be useful. I'm not sure what the timing is like on that. Maybe we'll ask you that question formally. NSP funding is one of the few resource tools that allow agencies to serve people without status. And while that's not part of this legislation, that is a reality for our sector. So we just wanted that to be noted.